Welcome to the Touch MBA Admissions Podcast. Do you need help figuring out which schools to apply to or how to get into the world's top MBA programs? Hey, you're not alone. Join thousands of others on this podcast and on our site, touchmba.com, as they seek the admissions edge. And now, here's your host, Darren Joe.
Hey, welcome to the Touch MBA Podcast. This is your host, Darren, and it's our 30th episode this week. We've been lucky to have over 20 admissions directors on this show, and I thought to celebrate this 30th episode, instead of having an interview with an admissions director or with a student, that we'd share our greatest hits over the past 30 episodes and bring to you 10 tips on how to get into your target business school. But before we get started, if you still need help figuring out which business schools to apply to, which business schools fit you best, and which ones you have a chance to get into, go head over to touchmba.com and tell us a bit more about yourself, and we'd be glad to help you out here for free. So we'd give you some school recommendations, we'd give you admissions tips, and you can also get your profile assessed by 6 top business schools in Asia and Europe, including IE Business School, HEC Paris, Rotterdam School of Management, NUS in Singapore, CUHK in Hong Kong, and CIBS in Shanghai, China. Go head over to touchmba.com, get yourself signed up, and we look forward to meeting you. So over the past 6 months, I've had over 20 MBA admissions directors on the Touch MBA podcast from schools like MIT Sloan, Duke, Virginia, CIBS, NUS, Nanyang, IE Business School, HEC, INSEAD, London Business School, etc. So I've had some great schools on the podcast, and I've asked every one of these admissions directors, what would you advise candidates to improve their chances of admission? And I've gotten some interesting responses from this question, and I wanted to share in this podcast 10 tips from these gatekeepers on how you can improve your chances of getting into their schools. So let's start with the first one from Megan Overbay, who is the Director of Admissions at Duke University's Fuqua School of Business.
Applying to get an MBA, I believe, and we believe, it's a process of self-reflection. And what is really important to do before you start it is to step back and really do some thinking about who you are and why you want to do this, why you think that this investment of your time and energy and money is going to be of value to you personally, and how you want it to grow and change you, and really understand the environments in which you flourish and what helps you grow and push yourself out of your comfort zone and learn what types of people and environments you really enjoy being in and that make you happy. Because I think one of the things that I see all of the time is that people apply to schools based on any number. Maybe they have an area of interest that matches theirs, or a ranking, or whatever it is that they might use to help them decide. And then they try really, really hard to prove to that school that they're a good fit for them. Ultimately, they don't really think until they get to the very end of the process about whether or not that school is actually a good fit for them. Like, they spend most of their time trying to prove to the school that they're good enough for it, instead of saying, is this school right for me? And you can't say if a school is right for you if you don't actually know who you are.
So the number one tip I can give you for researching schools and preparing a great application is to know yourself. And it's a bit ironic because, usually when you're researching schools, you're concerned about rankings, you're concerned about academic offerings, you're concerned about the network of the school and career opportunities. But really where you need to start is with yourself. And you need to know where you've been, what you're doing now, and where you want to go. And you really need to reflect on whether an MBA is the best option for you to get you from point A to point B. And as simple as this sounds, it's a very difficult process. A good analogy for this might be dating. If you don't know who you are, then everyone seems attractive. Anyone is a potential mate or suitor. But once you know yourself, you know what you're looking for, you know what you really value and what you really value in another person, if you really know what makes you happy, if you really know the kind of future you want with somebody, then you can really narrow down your pool of potential people to date. And it's the same process with picking an MBA program. So if you would like to talk through this process with someone, go head over to touchmba.com and we can help you with this process. But the key here is that self-reflection is the most important part of researching and applying to schools. Yes, I said it. All right, let's go to our second tip from Miss Nadia Ahrazem from the London Business School MBA program.
The biggest, I think, and most important pieces of advice I would give you is go out there and speak to the alumni, speak to the students, speak to student ambassadors, and speak to staff. Visit the school if you can. I know not everyone will have that opportunity because you might live quite far away, and we wouldn't expect you necessarily to make that one trip out to come and see us. But try to network regionally because there will be alumni close to where you live. And try to really find out about their experiences. They are the experts. They've gone through the process themselves. And I think one of the things that really stands out for us on the admissions committee is where the people have really gone above and beyond and really researched the school.
I can't overemphasize how important it is for you to speak to actual students and alumni of the program. This is the best and really, in my opinion, the ultimate way to learn about a school. I mean, of course you can read a website, you can go to a school's presentation, but this is how a school is presenting and marketing itself, right? Which is definitely important, but not as important as the actual MBA experience from real students and alumni. So once you have done the self-introspection process and you really know what you want to get out of your MBA program, the next step is to contact students and alumni who have similar interests as you and ask them, was this school a good choice for them given their career and personal goals? And this is the best way for you to really delve underneath the bright sheen of websites and brochures and to really get a really clear understanding of what a school's culture is all about and whether their academic, professional, and social offerings can help you get to that point B. I think one great tool to do this is LinkedIn. You can essentially research the alumni network of any business school on LinkedIn. And you can also see who in your network went to, say, Columbia Business School or Stanford Business School. Definitely use LinkedIn to get connected with students and alumni. If you don't have people within your immediate network that have gone to these schools, I would recommend two things. One is trying to find student ambassadors that are available on the school website or presidents of clubs that you may be interested in, for example, an entrepreneurship club or a media club. If you get in touch with these students and give them some context about what you want to do at their school. So definitely give them, in a concise manner, your background, what you're really passionate about, what you want to do, and ask them if they have any advice or if they can connect you with other students who would be able to help you. And I think that at most top business schools, the students of the program would be more than willing to help a prospective applicant out. Okay, so that's one way, contacting student ambassadors or club presidents. Another way is to simply contact the admissions office and let them know that you'd like to get in touch with students and alumni in a certain field or area. Now, just some caveats here, as I used to be in the admissions office. Don't just write an email and say, "Dear person X, can I please speak with an alumni of your university?" Okay, you're not giving the admissions office any context to know whether you're really qualified, to know if you've really thought through this MBA process or the school, or even if you're a prospective applicant. Maybe you're not even an applicant. You have to remember that MBA students are super busy. So, of course, the admissions office doesn't want to send their own students leads of prospects who really don't have any idea of what they're doing, right? So when you approach the admissions office, definitely come with some context to your request. Who you are, what's your background, what you'd like to do. Then you can really help the admissions team refer you to the right person. All right, let's go to the third tip from Jeff Carbone of MIT Sloan's MBA program.
So we believe that the best predictor of your future success are your past experiences. And we like to see examples that are current. So the past 3 years that examples in your essays, examples from your recommenders, stick to the past 3 years and let us know about you. We divide the process into two pieces, your demonstrated success and personal attributes. And the personal attributes are the things that we're looking for within those essays and those recommendations. So, innovation, creativity, teamwork, leadership, ability to work independently. Those are the things we're trying to find within those essays. And we pull those out to help us sort of score your application.
So Jeff brings up a really interesting point, and I think this is very particular to MIT in that they take what he calls a data-driven approach to the application process. So they're really looking for concrete evidence of accomplishments and passions in the past 3 years. Okay, so while this is very unique to MIT Sloan, I also think that in general, the idea of sharing your business results and accomplishments, your extracurricular activities, and your passions within the last 3 years is a really effective application strategy. If admissions officers are looking at an application and there's nothing really impressive within the last 3 years, then they're going to have questions, and their questions in their mind will be, is this person's career stagnating? What can this person really share with his classmates? That's why MBA programs place a really heavy emphasis on getting a recommendation from your current boss, or at the very least, your former boss. They want to have an idea of what your recent performance is like. So I think that whenever you can share recent examples in your essays, in your resumes, in your recommendations, in your application, that these will be much more powerful than, say, an accomplishment you had in high school or accomplishment you had your freshman year of college, which was 8 years ago. Definitely try to focus in on your most recent successes and recent stories, because these are often the most predictive of what you're going to do after your MBA. Let's move now to tip number 4 from A.M. Kannan from the Indian School of Business.
Look at all your achievements where you have displayed different kinds of skills. Just list them down on a sheet of paper before you even attempt it. Just go through mentally how satisfying was each of those achievements, and how did you actually translate that idea into a action. And then look at the ones that are likely to have made the most impact. The chances are you would have really worked hard and kind of displayed over and beyond skills when you made that achievement. Talk about that in the essay. The chances are the essay will really come out well. So because it not only talks about your skill sets, it tells us how you have overcome. See, every time you go out of the way to do something that is unique, okay, there will be naysayers. There will be some persons who will say, no, this will not work. And those are challenges. How did you overcome them? How did you convince the naysayers to your side? What we are really looking for is you go underneath the achievement. Just don't list out the achievement. I did this. It doesn't tell us what are the skills that you have displayed. You have to go to the list and you have to go to the challenges that you face. How did you overcome the challenges? That entire story gives a good impression of the candidate as a whole.
So Mr. Kannan's advice here is to go underneath the achievement and to not just list out your achievements. You have to provide context. So I think he gives some really good advice in terms of how to select the best stories to tell the admissions team. And here's some of his criteria. 1, which of your achievements did you overcome the most challenges and obstacles? because usually those simply make the best stories and they really show your traits and skills the best. The second criteria to think about was how satisfying was that achievement to you? Your most powerful stories will be the ones where you can answer those two questions very convincingly. Okay, so I think that's great advice from Mr. Kannan to go underneath the achievement and really talk about the obstacles you had to overcome to get there. Okay, now let's go to tip number 5 from Carolyn Diarte Edwards, who is formerly the admissions director of INSEAD and now has an admissions consultancy, Fortuna Admissions.
The school is looking at, the quality of your work experience and really looking to understand, are you someone who is a high performer? The best predictor of future performance is past performance. So they're not just looking at, have you managed teams or, have you had some fantastic leadership achievement, but they're looking at, have you delivered really good results? Have you delivered something that was beyond what was expected? Have you taken initiative? How well are you regarded by your colleagues? And that will come through hopefully in the recommendations. So I would advise candidates not to get too fixated on the leadership point, but to think about communicating, the quality of the work experience and what they have achieved so far in their career. Obviously, it can be very difficult to demonstrate leadership experience, especially if you're only sort of 2 or 3 years into your career. But what you need to demonstrate is that you're a high achiever.
So Carolyn's tip here is to show that you're a high achiever. You don't necessarily have to have managed a team of 10 or to have started a new company or an NGO to show that you're a high achiever. What you need to show, though, is that you get outstanding results. So even if you're a senior executive, what results have you been able to get? And this is really important, especially in your resume. Don't just list your job responsibilities in your resume, which I see all too often. Actually list how what you did helped the business's bottom line, if possible, whether that's revenue gained, whether that's costs saved, whether that's, getting 10 new customers, whether that's saving your company X hours of downtime. Whatever it is, quantify and qualify business results as often as you can, and especially highlight those things where you achieved above and beyond what was normal or expected. So if you got a promotion in 1 year, but usually that same promotion takes 3 years, be sure to mention that. If you won an award and this award was given to one person out of 150 people, be sure to mention that. So definitely provide context to your awards and your accomplishments at work. And I highly recommend that you listen to my interview with Carolyn. It's just full of fantastic tips on how you can really improve your application. So let's move now to our 6th tip, which is from Lawrence Chan from the Chinese University of Hong Kong's MBA program.
One point, I think they need to be quite thoughtful about their career plans. For example, you are an IT engineer. So there's a lot of people working as an IT engineers in almost any countries in Asia, okay? Singapore, Thailand, Philippines, India, China, Korea, blah, blah, so on and so forth. And you have pretty average performance in terms of your career achievement year to date, things like that. But then be realistic. So don't explain to the admission officer by saying, hey, the only company I'm going to work for after MBA is McKinsey.
Yeah.
But so it does not sound that impressive. It does not sound that reasonable.
Right.
So set up a reasonable path for your career plan progression. And if the plans are reasonable and more possible, then you have a better chance being admitted.
I think this is one of the most important tips, and that's to show a realistic plan for your career path. When you are explaining to the AdCom about what you want to do after your MBA, does it sound realistic? Does it sound well researched? And this is going to be especially important during your interview. If you're asked, well, what do you want to do after your MBA? And you you just say, well, I'm kind of thinking of consulting, or I don't know, maybe getting into sports marketing. This is a sign of someone who really doesn't know what they want to do. And don't get me wrong, I think a lot of MBA students really still aren't sure about what they want to do and use the MBA to figure that out and to learn and explore different industries and functions and geographies. Now, there's no doubt that's a huge part of business school, but you have to be able to present a compelling vision to the admissions committee about where you want to be post-MBA. Because whether you do it when you're applying to business school or during business school or after business school, this is how you're going to convince someone to hire you, to take you in. So the best way to do this is to really research your target geography, function, and industry, right? So that you have a pretty clear idea of the skills you would need and the requirements you would need to get into these jobs. So this is what Lawrence means by showing a realistic career path and doing homework. And one good way to do this is, again, to talk to students and alumni. Another is to really look at what companies are recruiting from this MBA program. Don't apply to a school saying you want to get a job with McKinsey when you look at their career services report for the past 2 years and realize that McKinsey hasn't recruited from that school. That's an unrealistic expectation. You want to really show that you've thought through your career options and you've thought through how this business school can help put you in touch with certain companies or certain people to help you achieve those goals. Okay, sorry, I kind of am on a bit of a rant on that one, but I really think that knowing and researching your possible career paths can have a huge impact on your application success. So let's move to the 7th tip, and this is from Sherry Hubert of Georgetown's McDonough's School of Business.
No, we do not have a minimum GMAT score. What we do have is, a range, so the 80% range, and most schools will have that as well. So what I would encourage individuals to do is to look at every school and look at where their 80% range is. And you really do want to try and fall in within that 80% range. If you are, looking just to get in, but you don't really necessarily want to be competitive for scholarships, and you want to make sure you're squarely in that 80% range, but maybe you can be on the lower end. If you really want to be competitive for scholarships, you need to be on the higher end of that 80% range. But, being within the range in and of itself will give you a good litmus test in terms of how competitive you are compared to other applicants.
Okay, so here's my basic breakdown with GMAT scores. First of all, you want to target at least the average of your target schools. And you definitely, at the very least, want to fall within the 80% range that most schools publish. If you score below the 80% range, you're going to have a pretty tough time getting into the program. If you score above the program's average GMAT score, they really have to look at your application, no matter how many applications they get, and no matter what your background is. If you score above the average, well, then you're above average academically in terms of the GMAT, and they really have to look at your profile. So by doing that, you give yourself the best chance of getting that interview. Now, here's the caveat. Clearly, there's some applicant pools that are much more competitive than others. Of course, the one everyone knows about is the male Indian with an IT background who scores, a 690, a 680, a 700 on their GMAT score. Unfortunately, for that applicant pool, there's so many of them that score doesn't really differentiate them from others. Right? So if you're from a very competitive applicant pool, then you really need to score higher than the average, and hopefully a lot higher than the average, to really stand out. Now, conversely, if you're from an underrepresented applicant pool, and I'll just pick one, say you're a Vietnamese female, that is a very underrepresented MBA applicant. So you will be given a little more leeway because A, so few people take the GMAT in Vietnam. There's already a very limited pool of candidates. And B, you're female, and a lot of schools would like to have more females in their classroom. Now, whether this is fair or not, that's a whole nother story. But I think that we can all agree that you'd want to get into an MBA program where your classmates are smart and where your classmates come from all over the world. It's so important to build your network, not just domestically, but internationally. Now, some of you may just want to stay in your one country or your one state for the rest of your career, but I think most MBA candidates plan on having an international career or a very international aspect to their career. So building a very international class, a very diverse class, is very important to most top business schools. So again, just to sum up my point, try to fall within that 80% GMAT range and definitely try to target above average GMAT score. Okay, enough of GMAT. So let's move on to tip number 8 from Catherine Alford from the University of Virginia's Darden School of Business.
For students who are applying from outside of the U.S., I think one of the most important things to do when applying to a school like Darden is to really work on your English language skills. Because we are a case-based school and we depend on students speaking up in the classroom, it's very important that you can speak up and others can understand what you are saying. Your classmates want to hear from you. They want to hear your perspective. So you want to make sure that your English is at a level that is easy to understand.
Okay, this may seem like a really obvious point, but I cannot emphasize enough how important your English communication skills are to your chances of getting in. Back when I was at SMU, we got lots of applicants with great GMAT scores and really solid work experience. But then when we talked to them in our interviews, and we had faculty involved in our interviews, they wouldn't be able to communicate their experience and their knowledge. They wouldn't answer the questions we asked them. We are really trying to get to know your personality and get to know your experience and what you'd be like in a classroom setting. And a lot of international students whose native language is not English struggle with this part of the application process. So the important question to ask yourself is, can you comfortably talk to someone about yourself and your business experience in English? And if you're able to do that, that's fine. That's really where you need to get to. So it might seem like an obvious tip, but it's a really important one. Let's move to tip number 9 from Roy Chasson of CIBS in Shanghai, China.
People that work here have gone through hundreds, if not even some thousands of essays and interviews. So we know very much to be able to screen and to look for people that are essentially, I would say, frank, honest, have a certain amount of self-awareness. I would say don't script your interview or don't script your overanalyze your essay. Be real. Know what your focus is. Know where you want to go in terms of, after the MBA. Know what the added value a CIBS program can offer to your career, and be able to synthesize that well with us and in front of us.
Okay, so Roy's advice is to be real. And many other admissions directors also shared the same tip. Be authentic, be yourself, be real. Let's unpack this be real, be yourself suggestion. Being real doesn't mean that you don't present your best self. Okay, that's the first thing. You want to be authentic, but you want to present your best self just as you would in a job interview. The key here to me is tone. I think tone is the right word to think about when you think about being real and being authentic. So one great tip that Roy gave and that I believe Nadia gave from LBS was, after you write your essays, let your friends and family members read your business school essays and ask them, does this sound like me? Does this sound like I'm being real? Because your friends and your family really know you. If the tone to them sounds a bit too superficial or sounds too forced, whatever it is, then you want to make sure that you rewrite those essays and that your voice is really coming through. That's the key. Your voice is coming through, your true voice. Everyone has a different one. Some people are more cynical, some people are more idealistic, have more energy, have less energy, are much more analytical, are much more emotional, but you have your own tone and your own voice, and that needs to really come through in your essays and in your interview. So in terms of your interview, there's no doubt you need to prepare. You really need to know 5 basic things before you go into your MBA interview. And definitely I'll link to my podcast on the questions behind the questions. If you can answer these 5 questions in your interview, then you'll be fine. But you need to speak naturally and speak in your own voice. And that's what Roy means by not over-rehearsing your interview. You definitely want to have bullet point answers in your head for how, you'd possibly answer the question, but you really just need to connect with the interviewer first, right? And the only way to really do that is to be natural and to be yourself. So easier said than done, but again, the key question is tone and voice. Is your unique tone and your unique voice shining through? Let's move to our final tip from Libby Livingston from Emory's Goizueta Business School.
Ideally, you apply in round 2 or no later than round 3. Something that we focus a lot on with candidates that receive scholarship is that you need to include your leadership and community involvement in your application. And there are sections within our application to do that.
Right.
Typically, students that receive a scholarship are above our GMAT and GPA averages. They have strong leadership skills, interpersonal skills, in addition to their strong professional experiences. So it's someone that looks that's above the average. It's really well-rounded and will be able to contribute a lot to the program.
Okay, so a common question I get is, what can I do to improve my scholarship chances? Business school is crazy expensive. We're all trying to save as much money as we can and get the best scholarship that we can. So what's the best way to do that? And, Libby tells the truth straight up. Typically, students that receive scholarships are above our GMAT and GPA averages and show leadership and community involvement. So straight up, most of us won't be able to go back to our university and raise our GPA. The best thing that we can do that is under our control in terms of helping our scholarship chances is to get a better GMAT score. You want to get a GMAT score that's in the top 20% of the class. So if the GMAT range is 640 to 740 for a school, try to get a GMAT score 740 or above. I mean, it's that simple. That immediately puts you into the top 20% academically, in terms of GMAT at least, of that class. So that's one great tip there. The second is to really show how you can contribute to the MBA program. And of course, MBA admissions officers are smart. They're not gonna believe empty promises. What they want to see is evidence of how you have really contributed to and benefited other organizations that you exist in right now, whether that's your workplace, whether that's a nonprofit, whether that's your sports team, whether that's your family, whatever it is. How have you made an impact and really helped those close to you where you are now? That is what they really want to see. And if you can show this and connect it with your passion of what you're really interested in business school, then this is pretty convincing evidence that this person will really be a great leader and a great ambassador for our MBA program. So again, what you need to show the MBA programs you're targeting in terms of winning scholarship money is you got to show that you're top 20%. It's that simple. You got to show that you're top 20% academically, that you're top 20% professionally, and then you're top 20% in terms of how you can impact the community there and be a great ambassador for the school. Now, some schools will award scholarships to increase the diversity of the class. So maybe someone's coming from a very underrepresented region and needs a bit of help financially to attend the program. Sometimes scholarships are awarded there. But even for that candidate that, say, is from Kazakhstan and needs help funding his MBA program, even to that candidate, I would say, try to score in the top 20% of your GMAT, try to be top 20% professionally, try to be top 20% ambassadorially, which isn't really a word, but you get the point. Because that candidate will further increase his chances of getting scholarship money from his MBA program. Okay, so I hope this was an enjoyable episode for you. I kind of feel very passionate about each of these 10 tips that we shared, but I really think it's a great starting place. in terms of how to think about and go about applying to business school. So just to recap, I'm going to summarize them 1 through 10. Here we go. Tip number 1 from Megan from Duke. You can't say if a school is right for you unless you know who you are. Okay. Tip number 2, speak to students. And that's from Nadia from LBS. Tip number 3, we like to see examples that are current. So the past 3 years. That's from Jeff Carbone from the MIT Sloan School of Management. Tip number 4, go underneath the achievement. That's from A.M. Kannan from the Indian School of Business. Tip number 5, show that you're a high achiever. And that's from Carolyn Diarte Edwards, who now helps run Fortuna Admissions and was the former admissions director of INSEAD. Tip number 6, show a realistic plan for your career path. And that's from Lawrence Chan from the Chinese University of Hong Kong. You really do want to try to fall within the school's 80% GMAT range. And that's tip number 7 from Sherry Hubert from the Georgetown McDonough School of Business. Tip number 8, really work on your English language skills. And that's from Catherine Alford from the University of Virginia's Darden School of Business. Tip number 9, be real. And that's from Roy Chazen from CIBS in Shanghai, China. And finally, our last tip, tip 10. Typically, students that receive scholarships are above our GMAT and GPA averages and show leadership and community involvement. And that's from Libby Livingston from Emory's Goizueta Business School. So if you have tips that have helped you get into top business schools or that you think could help other MBA applicants, please share them in the comments of this podcast. You can find this podcast at touchmba.com. I look forward to hearing your thoughts and see you guys next week.
Thanks for listening to the Touch MBA podcast. Don't be shy. We have a mailing list. Go to touchmba.com and get yourself signed up. And we'll keep you posted with the best tips and insider interviews on how to get into your #1 school. You can also find us on Twitter and Facebook at Touch MBA. See you soon.